Hey guys, let's see what we have here. Angle looks okay, I think. Yep, angle looks okay. How's everyone doing today? Yeah, we'll let people funnel in. Hey Hogan fan, yeah, it is very cold right now. Where are you about? Oh, I see. Yeah, that's pretty north for America, so can't be as bad as how Texas is getting it right now, though, I bet. Hey, Joam Kits. I'll answer that question when we start at the 5 minute mark. So we'll just keep letting people funnel in, and we'll see, and then we'll go from there as usual. Oh, that's true. Yeah, I keep forgetting that actually. Hey, Mark. Yeah, long time indeed. Yeah, we'll just keep waiting, guys. Usually start at the 5 minute mark. Yeah, so if you guys got any questions, just leave it in the comments. We'll start from the top up as usual, guys, at the 5 minute mark. So probably in a couple minutes. What's up, Bob? I never really asked, do you prefer Robert or is it Bob? I see. All right, we'll give another minute. Didn't really forgot to post this up on Instagram, so we'll let more people funnel in before we start. But then we're gonna start from the top up with Joam's question in 40 seconds. All right, let's see. For the 22 of you people out there watching right now, let's start from the top. So Joam's asking, at setup, do you want to see an unhinged lead wrist straight line from lower arm to thumb, or hinge to lift the toe of the club up? Love the content. Thanks, dude. So what I'm pretty sure you're asking about is at setup, do I prefer doing this or this? Well, I prefer more towards the down hinge, the unhinged position, ulnar deviated, if you want to call it that, whatever you prefer, thumbs down, whatever reference you need. I do prefer that because if you have the toe too high up, chances are the heel, and again, like whatever happens in setup does not necessarily mean you're going to return to that at impact. But for most players, having the sole of the ground, sole of the club flat on the ground without the hand excessively low, without the heel excessively lower than the toe, is going to help them deliver the club back to a better spot at impact. So I do prefer more of a thumbs down unhinged position. Now it doesn't have to be like extreme where it's like this, but so definitely as long as the sole of the club is flat on the ground, you will be in pretty decent shape. So somewhere like that. So hope that answers your question, Joan, but that's definitely my preference for most people. Riley, do you think swing direction is more important than swing path? And do you think this is a limitation of GC Quad not to have this on its software? No, I don't think so. I don't think swing direction is more important than swing path. And for most people, for most amateur golfers, swing path is about a reference point to go by, anyways. And honestly, I'm not too worried about GC Quad not providing that information. You can see enough on video when watching my client swings, or I'm sure other teachers watching their client swing. I'm sure they can see enough of it. And also, if you take into account angle of attack as well, you do get enough information what the swing is moving towards. So I'm not really too fussy with not having swing direction on GC Quad. I think GC Quad does a lot of good stuff already, and I'm perfectly happy with what kind of data it's providing me for me and my clients. Hogan fan. Hey, Larry, I was wondering whether you could tell us about your influences, how you learned your craft. Well, so I started playing, I guess, later than most people would who get into golf. So I took lessons with, well, funny enough, for you guys who have watched TXG's channel, I took a few lessons from Matt back when he was a pro at Richmond Hill. Oddly enough, very small world, actually. So I took a few lessons with him when I was younger, and then fast forward to like a couple of years ago, he joined Cedar Brae as well. I was already a member at Cedar Brae, so very, very small world that we became friends at Cedar Brae, but we met each other from long ago. Aside from that, when I was younger, Nick Starchuk was really, really good to me as well. I worked with him for a few years. He's a coach in Burlington. I worked with Scott Kaux in Hamilton. He's a really good guy as well. And I also flew to the U.S. to learn from a few different other people. Dana Dalquist. I took a 3-hour lesson with Austin Na. I spent 3 hours with. I went to go watch Chris Mason coach for a couple of days. So all those things have been really good. But I think one of the biggest influences I would say when people ask me this question that helps me get my ideas from is actually working with my strength and conditioning coach, just learning, just working with an S&C coach, not on the golf side, just learning how the body moves and how the body generates power and whatnot, and then experimenting that along with seeing myself on video and just previous ideas I've had. I think the S&C side, my strength and conditioning coach, Ian Warner Sr., I've had a lot of great influences from him in terms of how the body should move, how it should produce power. And then just having a lot of experiences, I would say, for the average golf pro with performance staff outside of golf, such as like athletic therapists who work with the best athletes in the world, learning from them how they treat their body, how they take care of themselves, how they prep for performance in competition and even practices. I think I learned a lot from that. So I would definitely say a lot of my influences from outside of golf on the performance side has helped me greatly in me with how I coach and develop and continue to learn to get better. Mark Martino, I'm too square at impact. Can I get into the perfect impact position, open pelvis, by cutting down my downswing and putting more emphasis on follow through? I'm not. You have to reword that. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by cutting down your downswing. And depending on what the other parts of your swing are doing, I wouldn't be too caught up with perfect impact position. I mean, everyone's ideal is a little bit different. If you're square at impact, something before impact has to be happening. So if anything, I would put more emphasis on looking at what's happening before impact, whether it's in the backswing, whether it's early in the downswing. Look at what that stuff is doing before looking into the follow through. If you want to try to get more rotation at impact. I will look at pre-impact instead of your follow-through after impact. Chris Arvia, hey Larry, big fan of your videos as they have really helped me get more rotation and a more consistent swing. Wondering if you have any advice on course nervousness. I hit them great at the range or on the monitor, but get me on the course and it all falls apart to where it looks like I have never golfed. Thanks for watching, Chris. So I would definitely say it really depends, like how long have you been playing? What kind of scores are you shooting right now? There's so many factors that may go into making someone nervous on the course. So I need a little bit more information on that. If you can tell me how often you've been playing, how often you play, how often you practice. So many factors go into it that go into maybe changing how you could potentially think about golf a little bit differently. Just perspectives, having different perspectives in general may help you not get so caught up with how you're performing on the golf course to your own expectations. Matthew Foster. So general thoughts on the trail heel coming off the ground during the downswing. Well, for most players, I would like to see the trail heel be pretty close to the ground, maybe on the ground at impact, depending on the club. Short irons, wedges, mid irons. I generally would like to see it on the heel at impact. People, when the heel comes off the ground at impact, I would like it to happen because you're pushing and rotating off the ground so hard. So when you look, like most people's trail heel come off the ground like this. So you can see the heel just literally like lifts up like this. That's not really how it should be done if your heel does come off the ground, because if you push and turn as you torque the trail foot into the ground and you push up, you can see as my heel comes up, it kind of like pushes and banks and rolls up rather than just like coming up like this. Totally different look. If your heel's coming up because you're pushing and rotating so hard off the ground, you're trying to create so much force from the ground, then sure, trail heel comes up, no problem. But if your trail heel is coming up because it comes up due to a incorrect movement pattern, then that's definitely not ideal and not my preference. But I do think for most most amateur golfers, they would probably benefit from having a trail heel on the ground or pretty close to the ground at impact. So definitely, I definitely think most amateur golfers to have that trail heel coming up off the ground. It's not coming up for the right reasons. Hogan fan, yeah. I actually haven't had Pockies in a while either. I just recently bought a couple packs last weekend actually. So haven't had it in a while. It still tastes just as good as I remembered it. Matt Adorno, what is the best way to keep the head behind the ball at impact? There's a straight line from the top of the shoulder to the ball with shaft and impact ideal. I wouldn't worry too much about keeping the head behind the ball at impact. I rarely tell any of my clients to feel that. Actually thinking back on it now, I don't think I've asked any of my clients to try to keep their head behind the ball at impact. There's better things to try to direct your attention and focus on. If you move well, if the intention is right in terms of how you move your feet and how you move your body in the downswing, the head will go wherever it wants to go, and it's not going to be in a weird place. So definitely, I don't think you should worry about trying to keep the head behind the ball at impact or artificially trying to keep the head behind the ball at impact. Dennis Hammer, Larry, what can you suggest for senior golfers that don't have as much flexibility that your instruction requires? I don't think my instruction requires more flexibility or less flexibility. I don't think. I believe what I'm teaching is pretty body friendly. I definitely put a big emphasis on making sure none of my clients get hurt. So I think if you think that my instruction from what I post on YouTube requires more flexibility, I don't want you to think that. Generally, like for a senior golfer, and I teach quite a number of senior golfers, I still have not seen one where they're actually physically incapable of rotating in the backswing or downswing. Sure, someone may be less flexible and they may rotate less in the downswing compared to someone else, but they should still be able to rotate sufficiently enough in the backswing to load themselves into a good spot, into an athletic spot, and then react from there. So if you feel like you're inflexible, I would really make sure that you make sure you're turning properly, right? So in the backswing, your trail hip should be turning back. You can see my trail hip turns back, my trail leg straightens and loses flex. When people understand how that happens, how the trail hip turns back, how the trail leg loses flex without locking out, when that happens, the upper body can turn a lot more and freer as well. Most of the time when that happens, they turn more than they think they're able to. So I'm not sold on people thinking they're not flexible enough to do something. Sure, they're in the downswing side of things. There may be layers, there may be different tiers of how much rotation you need. But at the end of the day, I think if the concepts are clear, I would not use flexibility as an excuse for not being able to make a good golf swing. For most people, I'm not saying. I'm sure there are a number of people there who are actually inflexible, but those are case-by-case scenarios that YouTube instruction is just not going to be able to accurately help without more information. JM Jan. Hey, Larry. High handicapper with access to a launch monitor. I believe I have a high AOA for my 7-iron. Seeing an average -8 is the ideal. -4, how do I achieve this? So yeah, so if you're hitting 8 degrees down with a 7-iron, it is a little on the steeper side, especially if you're a lower speed guy. I think 4 or 5-ish range is a good way to go about it. If you're someone who's hitting down on an 8 degrees, you're probably going to your lead side too early. I would first try to feel like you're staying on your trail side for longer in the downswing. If your only goal is to try to be -8, is to try to get from 8 down to 4 down. Now, if you're 8 down and you're also cutting across it, you're outsetting quite a bit as well. You have to feel that loop that I talk about quite a bit on the YouTube channel. If you're inside out already and you're still 8 degrees down, then I would suggest you stay on your trail side for longer in the downswing and not go to your lead side so much or so early. Mm, Ray Don, thoughts on long thumb and golf grip? I got no preference. I got no thoughts on it. As long as you're gripping it in the fingers of your in the grip in the fingers and the heel goes on top of your on your lead hand. I really don't care if it's long thumb, short thumb, medium thumb. As long as it feels good for you, especially like if you're someone who already has been playing golf for a while, changing a golf grip is actually pretty hard to do. So I wouldn't necessarily be too picky with long thumb or short thumb in a golf grip. Brent, hey Larry, struggled with a slice until I saw all of your videos for shallowing the club and the feeling of looping. Played 2 rounds this weekend and didn't miss a single fairway. Right? Thank you. Oh, that's great. That's really good to hear. And honestly, like if you struggle with a slice, if you're over the top, if you're outside in, those looping videos, those shallowing videos are a great place to start to help you not be as outside in. It may help you be inside out. It may help you neutralize the path. It may just help you not be so outside in. But if you're outside and guy who slices it, I do really highly suggest watching the looping videos and the shallowing videos that I have on the channel right now. Riley, from the top of the backswing into the downswing, can you demonstrate using the ground and any different for irons to drive using the ground? No, I wouldn't say it's any different. I like squatting and rotating. I like torquing the ground with your trail foot. Feel like you screw the ground with your trail foot. To power the swing, to sequence the swing. Now, in terms of using the ground with a driver, sure, I may try to use the ground more to try to create more speed because I got to push up harder to create more speed. It's kind of like for let's say if I'm swinging a 7-iron, I'm probably not going to go at max effort. If I want to hit driver, I'm probably going to go at max effort. Me going at max effort would result in me trying to use the ground more than me trying to use the ground with a 7-iron because it's not at max effort, but the intention and the sequencing and the feels is still the same. I'm still trying to torque the ground. I'm still trying to squat and rotate and push back up and around. All that stays the same. It's just the intention behind how much force I want to create that will change from driver to iron to wedge. Chris RVF, follow up on your response. I'm a high handicapper, hard time breaking 100, been playing 2 times a week for the past 2 years, but more casually for 10 plus years. So, and you ran track in college, which really hurt my game since it's pretty much an anti-rotation sport. So if you can take lessons, taking lessons is probably a good place to start. If you play 2 times a week, is actually quite a bit, especially for an average golfer. That's a good number of rounds. I would really just suggest taking good lessons if you have the resources to do it. Taking lessons would definitely give you more confidence and just a better framework to work with to play better golf. If you ran track at a college level, you must be a pretty athletic guy at the very least. So just learning how to use your body properly through good lessons will be a good place to start if you have the resources to devote to it. And then you can play much better golf for the rest of your life, rather than trying to find something every round for the rest of your life. Brent, how open should the hips and shoulders be at impact? Based on recording myself, I'm around 25 to 30 degrees open, but I'm still looking closer. I still look closer compared to your videos. I'm assuming you say I'm still close compared to your videos. Is this amount okay? What is ideal? There's no ideal. Everyone's different. So I honestly would not try to chase a certain amount of degrees open. If you hit the ball well, that's great. If you don't hit the ball well, I would look at why. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be more open. So I don't think you need to put so much emphasis on trying to be maximizing how open you are at impact. I would really I would just look at what you are not as good at and try to see what you need to do to improve that, rather than putting so much emphasis on trying to look as open as you possibly can. Matt, do you like your wrist turned down and set up almost like Bryson? Yeah, I'm not going to have it excessively down, but I do like it where the sole of the club is flat on the ground, for most players, they may feel like their wrists are turned down. For other players, it may feel normal. I just don't like the hands being so excessively like hinged at setup. So when you look, like if the club is square, if the sole of the club is square at the ground, and then at setup, it's relatively flat here. I don't like that excessively low hand setup where it looks hinged at setup. I don't think that's a good thing to start from for most amateur golfers. Now, I also don't need people to do this where they feel like they're completely like maximizing the down hinge. I also don't need either. So as long as the sole of the club is flat on the ground, then you're going to be in a pretty decent spot. John, hi Larry, hope all is well. What specs on TrackMan do you look out for the optimal drives, and how do the numbers affect how you teach players? Do you have an optimal driver swings? It's hard to say what the optimal range is if we've never worked with each other, John. If you're trying to maximize your drives, I would suggest trying to optimize it with a fitter and get a good fitting for your driver. That'd be a better place to start. If you're working with someone, I would suggest talking it over with that person. In terms of my clients, some of my clients hit 6 up on it. Some of my clients hit 1 or 2 up on it. It really just depends on the entire and the big picture. If they hit 2 up on it and they find the middle of the face really, really often and the delivery is very consistent, I'm not going to make them hit 2-3 degrees up on it more. So it really just depends on the entire picture. Now, on the flip side, if someone is also only 2 degrees up, but they hit the ball not very good, sure, we may change the movement, and as a result, the angle of attack may rise or may lower, but I'm not going to be chasing numbers. I'm not going to try to change numbers for the sake of changing numbers. I'm going to change the movement, and as a result, the numbers will change. So I don't work within a particular range. But there may be a particular range, optimal range for that specific player based on my experiences with that player. But that's something that I won't be able to answer that question for you, just as we've never worked with each other. Mike, hi Larry, can you explain differences in impact position for a wedge system versus full swings to ensure that bounce is in play? Yeah, good question. So full swings compared to wedge swings is actually quite different because the wedge swings are a much lower speed, right? So a lot of times when I show these videos, when we rotate, we're pushing and rotating so hard at impact, you can see a lot of the left butt cheek back to the left back, trail arm slightly bent somewhere like this, right? And also when we go at full swing, we're going to be hitting down on it. The bounce isn't in play, right? When you talk about the bounce, I have my 58-degree wedge here. I wouldn't really focus too much on trying to get impact position to look a certain way. I would be more focused on making sure you can move your body well enough to move this club the way you want to move, okay? And whatever happens, happens. However impact will look, it will look. So to use the ground, to use the bounce properly with the wedges, we know when you set up, the leading edge is higher up off the ground, right? So when I set up, the leading edge is slightly higher off the ground. The main focus is really just learning how you can maintain this distance from you to the club so that when you return to impact, the bounce is the bottom thing, is the furthest thing away from you, right? If you start leaning the shaft and leading the hands forward, now the leading edge is the closest thing to the ground. I want the bounce to be the closest thing to the ground. So whatever happens in the impact happens. You just have to do whatever it can, and you can experiment on this. Not just you, Mike, but anyone who may be struggling with using the bounce. When you set up, and I like setting up with roughly 50-50 shaft, 50-50 weight, straight line from the lead shoulder to the hands to the club. That typically means the bounce is there because we're not leaning excessively. If you try to maintain that and just try to return that at impact, chances are, if you stayed 50-50, if you did not go to your lead side, you did not try to create lag and drag it forward, you're probably going to return the bottom of the club back to the ground. And how most of my clients, I ask them to do so if they struggle with this, is I have them feel a mini loop so that they come a little bit more from the inside and a little bit shallower, so that If it comes from the inside, the club's getting lower to the ground, and the club's getting lower to the ground, chances are the bounce is also lower to the ground, which is good because I don't want the leading edge lower than the bounce. So I feel a little bit of a mini loop, feel like it come more from the inside, that will allow the bounce of the club to increase its likelihood of returning to the ground before the leading edge, which is what we want for most of these small wedge shots. So don't worry too much about impact position so much when you're trying to use the bounce. I would worry more so your awareness of how your body moves that bounce. Hope that answers the question, Mike. Joe, will a heavier driver go further? Tensei orange cut an inch shorter. I think I need to add more weight to it though. It depends. Some of my clients swing a heavier driver faster and hit it further. Some of them swing a lighter driver and the lighter driver goes further. If you have equipment questions, I suggest going to get a fitting because it's not something I can answer for you without knowing how you swing, without knowing how you hit other clubs. I would definitely suggest you go for a good fitting. David Reynolds, would you say the wrist action on the downswing is the same for wedges all the way to driver? I think the intention should be the same. And when it comes to full swings, the intention should be the same. We want the wrist. The wrist will load somewhat, varying amounts depending on what kind of swing you have, how you swing it. In the downswing, I would like the trail wrist to bend back a bit as the club shallows, regardless if it's wedge or driver. So the intentions are the same. And then as you release the club, I would also like my clients to feel like the release, the intention is also the same. Now, what really happens is going to vary because driver swing is much faster than wedge swing, but the intention is going to be pretty similar. I like this to keep it pretty constant for all full swings, just to keep the consistency level as manageable as possible. Mike C. Hey, Larry, I'm more of a field learner golfer and was wondering if your online lessons would work for that lifestyle or if I should look for in-person lessons here in Waterloo. I think my online lessons have been going really, really well for most of my clients that I work with from all over the world. Now, at times it might not be a right fit, and if that does happen, I've had no issues with just giving them their money back and calling it a day. And that's fine too, because not everyone's the right fit for everyone. But I don't think whether if you classify yourself as a field learner and golfer, as long as you can still video yourself and we find a way to calibrate the right fields for you to get a desired result in the outcome of the movement, then online lessons could definitely help. So I wouldn't say online lessons won't help for you unless we try. Aaron, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions in the golf swing? I think holding the grip lightly was a very big misconception that I think a lot of people have. I think, what else is there? I think holding the wrist angles is also a big misconception. I think just thinking about lag and what lag was a really big misconception. I think downhinging is also a very big misconception. People always say, "Oh, are you casting? Are you going to swing as slow if you downhinge?" That's not true. I think those are some of the biggest misconceptions I see personally in their golf swing right now. Tactical T-Rex, you finally made it to a live. Well, next Thursday at 6, we're going to have another one as well. Jason, thoughts on super speed sticks? I think it's good for some people, and I don't think it's for everybody. I think it's good for some people. Unless you try it, it's hard to say whether or not it will work for you. But I do think there is merits to it. I mean, a lot of people are using it, and it seems like they're using it with good success. So I definitely think it's a worthwhile try if you have some money to spend and you want to see if it'll help you get faster. That's a good place to start. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. At least you tried. You live knowing you don't regret anything. So definitely worth a try if you are thinking about it. And thank you. Yeah, this hoodie is pretty comfortable actually. So good to wear during these cold winter months here in Canada. You're welcome, Matt. So that really helped. Your other issue you have is when you swing and you find that you never get to my trail heel, all my weight stays forward, almost leaning towards the target. Any drills to help? If you never get to your trail heel in the backswing, I'm assuming you're saying you feel like you stay on your lead side a lot during the backswing. I would suggest that you take your normal setup, you bring your trail foot to your lead foot. So I'm just gonna say, so I'm gonna bring my right foot to my left foot. I'm gonna take my right foot, I'm gonna step back as I turn, and that should help you bring more of your load into your trail side, okay? So you're gonna take your normal setup, trail foot to lead foot, trail foot steps back as you take it back, and then you can swing from there. That should help in helping you load into your trail side a little bit better if you struggle with that. All right, Tactical T-Rex. Hey, Larry, I struggle with short chips around the green from thicker rough. Any advice on hitting through thick rough without chunking or hitting too hard? So for short chips around the green from thicker rough, the key to hitting thicker rough is making sure you have enough speed to get through that thick rough. Now, I think a lot of people, when they worry about hitting too hard, the concept's a little, and they chunk it. That's usually because they try to pick at it. They try to make sure the contact's very, very clean, and the leading edge comes into play. How I like people to play this shot, if they struggle with it, is you open the face a little bit, and you actually try to hit the ground first. Try to direct your energy an inch before the ball into the grass. You can swing at it a little bit harder. You can get that speed to go into the grass, and then that energy is just going to disperses and pops the ball up. Especially for short chips where you need the ball to land soft, this will be a really, really good way to do it. So I would suggest experimenting with this if you can. If you've never done this before, hit the thick rough 1 inch behind the ball and just leave the club in there. Feel like you try to disperse all your energy into the rough. You're not trying to follow through like you typically will with a chip. You're not swinging through the rough. You're going to swing into the rough an inch before the ball, and then just try to release your energy there and just let that energy disperse and pop the ball up. How I would like you to I would recommend you try to see if that helps or not. Victor Nava. Hey, Larry, does the firing of the downswing happen after squatting, or is squatting supposed to be the firing? I feel like I'm initiating my downswing too early. Any drills or feels to help? The squatting is really like the loading phase of the downswing, right? So if you think of it as like doing a jump, right? When you try to jump as high into the ground as you can, you're going to load the jump by squatting into the ground, and then you explode up, right? So from the top of your backswing, like so basically like I'm jumping, I'm loading, and as we jump, that's how we explode up. So in the backswing, you load the jump to react back up and you jump up, right? A good reference point is feeling like you load the jump and you squat until pelvis at the ball, and that's when you react back up and jump up and around after you get the pelvis at the ball. That's just a rough reference, but we want to make sure that things are reactive, right? We're not going to think, I'm going to squat to pelvis of the ball. Okay, I'm there. I'm going to jump up now. Just try to make it as reactive as you can. Just try to feel like you're jumping as high as you can. Load the jump and jump up as high as you can. Make it reactive and see what happens from there. Would be what I would suggest you try, Victor. John, do you find that there is a correlation between timing and where you hit it on the face? Example, if I find toe side dominant misses, am I too quick or slow at transition? Thanks. No, I don't think so. I don't think there is a correlation with that. I wouldn't look too deeply into it. There is probably going to be there's a different issue at play where the movement's a little bit different that's causing those misses. I would suggest looking at that first rather than a timing issue, because I don't think it is a timing issue. Matt, I tend to straighten my right leg a lot and get into my left side early. I think this is leading to an eventual stall flip. Any ideas? So the right leg does have to straighten and lose flex in the backswing. If you feel like you're going to your lead side too early, I would suggest you feel like you're hitting off your trail foot. You try to load the trail side in the backswing. and feel like you stay on your trail side as you try to get your trail leg to regain flex in the downswing, okay? That's what I would suggest you try to do if you get to your lead side too early. And yes, if you get to your lead side too early, that would reduce the opportunity to rotate in the downswing, and then that would eventually lead to a stall and a flip. So load the trail side and stay on your trail side in the downswing, making sure you let your trail leg regain flex as you stay on your trail side in the downswing. Steve, is the wedge grip the same as iron grip? Yes, I would suggest grip for most players, most chip shots, grip it the same way as you do with driver, iron, wedge. There may be some specialty shots where you may want to change up how you grip it, but for most players, for most amateur golfers, that's definitely not something you guys should be messing around with. Keeping things constant, reducing the variables will help the most, and you can hit a lot of different shots with the same grip you have with your irons if you do it with the wedge. So I would suggest trying to keep the wedge grip and the iron grip the same. Chris Farrell, do you think having weekly lessons is a good idea? What do you think is a way to go about getting better while putting a lot of practice? I think weekly lessons is a great idea if you have the resources to do so. Just having that weekly check-in, making sure things are progressing as planned. Now, golf progress is never linear; is never like a straight uphill progression. It's going to be like up and down. But just having weekly lessons, I think, reduces the likelihood of it going too far down on those downswings. And then obviously putting in practice between lessons is a good idea. Like for me, for me and my clients, if I get all my weekly lesson clients to send me videos in between lessons if they do practice, which helps us keep things on track. So I really like the weekly lessons, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour. That's just my personal preference. I think it's a really good way to build good foundational changes and make them stick for the coming season and beyond. DF, your students all seem to have above average swing speeds. Can you quantify or qualify speed gains from where they started to where they are now by adding rotation and depth? I mean, not all my students have above average swing speeds, but we definitely gain a lot for almost all my clients. Now, if someone doesn't rotate and they have no depth in the backswing, if you learn to rotate and you have depth, you're probably going to gain. You're going to gain a decent bit depending on what your starting spot is. But it's hard to say. It's hard to say what you potentially may get without seeing how you swing. It's hard to guarantee anything. There's no guarantees in life, but I do believe that if you're someone who lacks rotation in the backswing, you lack depth in the backswing, if you improve those different aspects of your golf swing and get more rotation and get more depth, you're definitely going to increase the possibility and the potential of your speed in your golf swing that you can eventually produce. Hey, Kid Wilson. Mike, can you explain your preference for putting grip? So I don't really have too big of a preference on putter grip, except that I like so the putting grip is a little bit different than the grip of the full swings. So like talking about like the middle of your palm, like the lifeline of your palms, I like those going across these edges of the putter. So I like the lifeline of the palm to go on the edges because that typically encourages the wrist to downhinge more in setup. So if you downhinge more at setup, that would kind of lock your wrist out a bit more to reduce the likelihood of it twisting around. If I lock my wrist up because I'm downhinged the most, it kind of like locks everything up. It's like one locked out unit. Then from there, all I have to worry about or focus on is just rock this locked out unit back and forth. If my hands are too low, or let's say I'm gripping it the same way as I do with a normal full swing, where it's more the heel of the hand goes on top of this, not on my lifeline on my palms, then there's more likelihood for it to hinge and rotate, which I don't want. And with putting, we just want to remove as many variables as we can for most players. to hopefully give them the best chance at starting the ball on their desired line. PJS, what is a good way to measure proper distance on the driver? I found it when I push a right fade slice, I seem to jam myself on a downswing by being too close and leaving the face open. I think if you're seeing misses like those fades and slices, it's something beyond simply fixing the distance at setup between you and your hands. I mean, if you don't feel like you have issues from your distance between you and the club with your irons or woods or hybrids or wedges, but then you feel that way maybe with a driver, I would suggest looking at the swing to see if there's some issue with the swing first, because even if you try to stand closer and further, you're probably still going to get those same misses. So instead of trying to like search and hope that it's just a distance issue at setup, and you're gonna start fidgeting, and you're gonna start searching, sometimes closer, sometimes further, it just breeds too much doubt in your head. I would say look at your swing, and there's probably some issue in your swing that's causing those misses before trying to say it's the distance at setup. Roger David, hey Larry, I live in Anchorage, Alaska, and all we have in the winter are about golf simulators. Can I trust the numbers I'm seeing from them? Like it's definitely better than nothing having about golf simulators. Now, depending on if they read spin properly, some about golf simulators I've seen, the balls are there's actually markings on the balls that help them read the spin rate. There's some markings on top of the clubs that help them measure the club path as well. If those about golf simulators have that, then it's definitely more trustworthy than ones that don't. Like I've seen about golf simulators who do have what I have just described. I also have seen people hit on about golf simulators where it's just like a normal any kind of golf ball with no marking on it, with no marking on the club. They usually put a sticker on top of the club. If that doesn't happen, then it's the club data. It's definitely not reliable. And then for ball data, you're really just looking at launch angle and ball speed when it comes to that. Kid Wilson, hey Larry, if I put a club on your left hip facing you at address, do you want the left hip to move at all towards your target line during the backswing, or should the right hip get deeper? And should the right hip get deeper during the swing while the left hip stays where it is? If that makes any sense, depends on the person. I mean, some people the left hip may get a little bit closer to the target. I'm fine with that, depending on how the rest of the movement goes. As long as the lower body. A good template is for most players, if your lower body is turning somewhat centered and your upper body turns somewhat centered, maybe slightly biased towards being away from the target, you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot when making the backswing. So I wouldn't get too caught up in these fine details, because it's hard to be this fine and detailed with these questions when we've never worked together before. So I can't really say what's better or not, but what you described is okay. I don't see any big issues with it, as long as the rest of the body is working well. DF, can you describe what drives the shallowing in the loop? Is it all body rotation or combination of body and arm wrist? So if you watch my looping videos on the channel, it's going to be a conscious effort. If you've never looped before, if you're outside in, it's going to be a conscious effort of looping your entire arm, hand, club unit back as you rotate in the downswing. So you're trying to feel like your arm, hand, club unit goes back as the rotation starts going towards the target. And that's how I would suggest you try doing this first. All right, I'm gonna answer these last two questions and then I gotta go. But we'll see you guys next week, Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time again. So not really exactly sure how to pronounce your username. Zatibi, I'm not gonna, there's the Z guy. So anyways, how can I reduce dynamic loft and create more shaft lean at impact? I lose all my angles between P6 and P7 shaft parallel as vertical at impact. A pro recommended I put an alignment stick on the grip end of an iron, work on making swell swings without alignment stick touching my body. Is that simple? Is that simple to fix? No, I mean, no, I don't think I don't really like that. If you're working with a pro, I would suggest you. I mean, he may have a method behind his madness. It's not something I would personally do. I'm assuming you're not working with anyone. If you're asking me questions about this, um, it's really making sure that the club head stays behind your hands. If the club head stays behind your hands in the downswing and your arm stays against your chest in your downswing where the arm and hands not overtaking, then you will have a better shot at reducing shaft, at having shaftling and reducing dynamic loft at impact. Making sure your lead shoulder is staying down in the downswing as it turns is also a good way to do it. Things that increase dynamic loft and you lose shaft lean is when you tilt back with the upper body in the downswing, the lead shoulder comes up, and when the club head gets kicked out in front of the hands. You want to feel like the club head stays behind the hands at all times, and where the trail wrist bends, the lead wrist flattens and bows, that will help you reduce the dynamic loft and have more shaft lean at impact. Chris Farrell. I have trouble rotating my left hip out of the way in transition and downswing. Any tips on how to feel like I'm in control of my hips? I would suggest thinking about your left leg, right. So if you're trying to get this left hip to rotate in the downswing, I would suggest making sure your trail foot's torquing the ground because you use the grip and the reaction of your foot to the ground to help screw your hips around and feeling like your lead leg gets out of the way as well. That will help the lead hip turn. If you struggle with turning your left hip around, I wouldn't just isolate the hip movement. I would think about it as right foot screw the ground clockwise as the left leg gets out of the way. That would be a good way for you to get more rotation in the downswing. So there's only 2 more questions. I'll answer these quickly as well before I go. So bro versus bro gaming. Hey Larry, I had a question about how to get a lower handle impact, avoid lifting the handle. So if you're someone who has a very high handle at impact, where your toe is excessively down at impact, let's just say on GC quad, I would suggest doing the video I filmed last week or 2 weeks ago. It's called my favorite golf drill. I think it's like a mapped out downswing drill. Let me just look it up quickly here. It's a mapped out downswing drill where we piece things out. It's called one of my favorite drills, map out downswing drill, to improve everything. If you work on that drill, you're gonna learn how to get a lower handle at impact and not have your toes so down at impact. That will be a good place to start, bro versus bro gaming. You're welcome, DF. Dan Sapp, your thoughts on an impact bag? I'm not really a big fan of it. I don't use it with any of my clients, and I don't suggest any of my clients use it. I just don't really think there is a point to it based on what it was originally designed for. So hope that answers your questions. You're welcome, Z. You're welcome, bro versus bro gaming. So we'll call it a day. I gotta run. Any questions you can leave in the comments in this video, or you can come back next Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. We're gonna try to make this a weekly thing. I will remember to post it on my Instagram a little earlier rather than being so last minute today. But thank you everyone for tuning in. We will see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay warm if you are in the cold, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.